Working Cows Podcast, episode 399. This episode is brought to you by Farming Without the Bank.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios. And this episode is brought to you by Farming Without the Bank. None of you are farming like you did 100 years ago. Why are you financing it like you did 100 years ago? The biggest part of your operation is the money that runs through your hands, and you let someone else control that. The bank gets the final say in what you get money for and when you pay it back. For many, this is a great relationship. Until it's not. Farming Without the Bank shows you how you can take back control of your money so that you can make the bank plan B instead of plan A. This is done by you creating your own banking system you own and control. To learn more, tune into the Farming Without the Bank podcast and go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book. Once you've read the book, Mary Jo will meet with you one-on-one and help you determine where and how to get started. She'll most likely also touch base on some estate transition ideas, financing ideas, business growth or startup ideas, and many other things she has experience with from helping thousands of farmers and ranchers like you. So go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book today and subscribe to the Farming Without the Bank podcast. Very excited to be joined by Jared Luhman. Jared is the host of the newly rebranded Ranching Returns podcast, and a very great podcast there that he is running and helping people to find out how to manage their business to get more returns from their ranching business. So that's very good. And today we're going to talk to him about real estate investments. I think that is a critical idea for us to make sure that our ranch businesses are not expected to do more than they can, and that we find ways to fill in the gaps between the lifestyle that we want and what our ranch business can reasonably be expected to produce. And off-ranch investments are a great way to diversify and mitigate risk and all these kinds of things. And so we're going to talk to Jared today about some of the nuts and bolts of how he got started, how him and his wife got started, and some of the lessons that he's learned over the years in ranch, some of the lessons he's learned over the years with regard to real estate investing. So Jared, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast. Welcome back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Clay.
Yeah. Well, in a recent rebrand of the podcast, would kind of just like to spend a few minutes talking to you about the name Ranching Returns. What are some of the ideas, like when I talk about working cows, I mean that we want cows that work for us, that we don't have to work for them. And we want to work cows in a low stress way. And we want to, all those kinds of things, put the cows to work, improving the land resource and some of those things. So I'm assuming you've got some similar ideas that are in your mind when you come up with a name like Ranching Returns.
First of all, I'm just curious, when you started your podcast, if you struggled as much as I did trying to come up with a name, because that was a challenge. You just crushed it right off the bat. And when I was switching away from Herd Quitter to something else, I'm like, man, what can pack in kind of a general idea as much into a short name that's quick, concise, that people can gather a lot of real quickly. And that was a challenge. And man, I was asking a bunch of people different ideas and things like that, and showing I used AI a lot for different logo ideas and stuff. And I was throwing around different ideas and names with people, trying to kind of figure out what stuck, and largely with the idea of trying to kind of carry on with the same trend of conversations that I've been having. And this Ranching Returns one is ultimately what kind of stuck, because, profitability in my mind is one of the most, if not the most important part of running a successful business, farm, ranch, whatever that might be. You got to be profitable before you can do anything else. But there's a lot of other returns that come from ranching and stuff too. And other ones that I really wanted to hit on were, the return that we can have to our land when we have a really good management, and would we care about our land and manage in the way that a lot of the guests that we have on our podcasts talk about. And you can see amazing returns to your land management through that kind of ranching and stuff. And also return to lifestyle. It was kind of funny when I threw some names at my mom. She's a very wise person. I was like, what do you think of this? And she's like, I don't really like, there was one logo, it had a dollar sign. And she's like, I don't like this focus necessarily purely on money. There's so much more you love about ranching than just the money. And she hit it right on the head. And so, there's the land aspect and there's the lifestyle aspect. And so really the idea of ranching returns is talking about what are all the returns that we can get from ranching and how can we maximize those, profitability and financial returns being one of the most important starting points. But once we've reached some level of optimum financial return, that we can start, maybe focusing even more so on some of those other returns to our land and wildlife and ecosystems and ultimately our lifestyle. That's, everybody calls this a lifestyle business, or, we're in this for the lifestyle. But when you hear a lot of people talk about their lifestyle, it doesn't always sound the most enjoyable either when they're, I went 13 years without a vacation and none of my kids want to come home because they don't want to work as hard as me. I mean, we can really improve the return to our lifestyle that we get from ranching. And so the ranching returns ultimately is just, we're going to talk about all the different returns that we can get on ranching is the idea behind that.
I recently hosted somebody at a Bible camp as a speaker, and I had enough other things on my mind that I kind of forgot to be real hospitable for this person. And so they ended up sleeping in a camper without air conditioning in a really hot week of the year. And he told his kids that the best stories come out of less than ideal circumstances. And so I think that we should probably strive to be boring ranchers, people that don't have any stories to tell, because a lot of those stories that I would tell about ranching and growing up would come out of blizzards, and calving in blizzards and those kinds of things. It's like, it was blizzarding, but I sat there in front of the fireplace drinking coffee. The cows had a good place to get out of the wind, and they had plenty of feed and everything else in front of them. And so that's my blizzard story.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everybody else is remembering of a blizzard is maybe a lot less pleasant. Ours is like, that was a beautiful night, wasn't it? Yeah. Watching that snowfall. Yeah. It's funny how different it can be, perspectives. Again. Yeah, that's right. That's a good, there you go. I like that. You need to start making hats.
Yep. What have been some of your favorite lessons learned or things that maybe have changed in your life on your operation as a result of the podcast?
Yeah. I'm lucky. I grew up on a farm where my dad was pretty progressive in this way, I should say. I'm not sure if I've shared kind of our farm story. My grandpa was a very much mainstream, like in the 70s and 80s, he was farming about like over 1,000 acres, had a couple hundred head dairy herd, very high production feedlot dairy. He had a large, super growthy Simmental beef herd and a bunch of sheep, and very much high input, high everything. And we had a New Zealander who came and told my grandpa and dad how they were nuts and working way too hard. And my dad and my grandpa was, to his credit, said, John, my dad, you should go to New Zealand and figure out what he's talking about. And so my dad went and then spent 8 months in a grazing dairy and a grazing beef station and stuff out in New Zealand, and came home, and kind of the rest is history for us. We've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. So a lot of the things that I talk about, well, definitely there's ideas that have, changed how I might think about things and stuff. The things that we talk about a lot are things that we've been doing on our farm for a while. But what I'd say, one of the greatest benefits I've always gotten out of podcasts, it's not necessarily the specific ideas that I get, but like the reinforcement of those ideas and like the support. Like if you don't have a network of people around you doing this stuff, it can be hard to do things yourself. And there are not a lot of people around us doing this kind of stuff. But when you tune into 3 different podcasts every Monday morning that are released with the same kind of content, and you hear a different story every week of people trying the same stuff and finding success with it and sharing how awesome their lives are and how profitable their ranches are and how amazingly productive their land is and different things like that, it's like, okay, there's something to this, it's the positive reinforcement of it for me. Like, I listen to a lot of real estate podcasts and stuff too, and we do some investing in real estate, and it's the same thing. I don't learn anything new. It's relatively simple. The idea of, save up, buy real estate, build equity in it if you can, put some work into it or whatever. It's nothing new. But when you hear the stories of people retiring at 35 because they invested in real estate right out of college and things, it's like, man, okay, these are real. This is possible. And I just love that. I will never get sick of that feeling of like that reinvigorated, like new excitement coming from somebody's awesome story that's being shared. And if anything too, what podcast? Some other podcast I listen to, they talk about how, we've all heard the saying, you're the average of the 5 best or the 5 people you spend the most time with. And, we may or may not all be able to be surrounded by people who are leaps and bounds ahead of us in whatever journey we're on. I might not be able to go and call up, the average person may not be able to go up and call somebody who's got to run in a couple thousand cow ranch and different things like that. But if they can listen to a podcast where they hear the story of that person starting from where they are and getting to where they're at now, you can almost kind of surround yourself with those people through podcasts, which to me is, I would say, help me level up. I've heard the term used, in my mindset anyway, where if I'm, surrounding myself with the people of my community, that the average cow herd is 30, 40 cows, kind of a side thing, and their focus is row crops and stuff, I never would have been able to get out of that kind of way of thinking and push myself to, okay, what really is possible? What can I do here? What can I do beyond here? Because there's people like Sage Askin running ranches in multiple states. And through the podcast, I connected with a guy in Nebraska who's running 7,000 cows. I haven't had him on the podcast. He's not interested in that, but I connected with him on a phone call through this. He's running cows all over the country. And I'm just like, man, there are so many possibilities out there that, you may not be able to talk to those kind of people, but it pushes you out of your status quo kind of comfort zone, I guess. That those are the things I'd say I get the most out of it, in addition to ideas like sell by marketing or maybe some new, little fundamental changes in how we operate or change, our way of thinking and stuff too.
Yeah. I think it was probably Brian Alexander who coined it. He just is a t-shirt generator, but he said it was Askin Global Headquarters, I think is what the name of that ranch is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's right. I like that.
But another thing I got to say,
he alone has inspired those. Sage.
What's that?
Oh my gosh. Just the people that Sage has probably inspired through the conversations that folks like us have had with him. And that's not to toot our own horns. That's right. Sage. That's pretty incredible, though. Just his one-man story, one family story, his wife, too.
For sure. Yep. Yeah. And another thing I got to point out here, just from a break the fourth wall podcast perspective, is you gave the best answer to probably one of the worst questions, because that's my least favorite question is, what's your favorite episode? What lesson have you learned? I'm too close to it to learn from it a lot of times, I think, and so I think, again, it's that what you were talking about, that networking and accountability. I'm not cognizant of the ways that it's changed me, impacted me, made me different. It's just being steeped in all of these ideas and these conversations. Just it changes you. You don't really know specifically what's different now, or what practices have necessarily changed, or you can't point to the conversation that created it, but you went home and you said, "Oh, I got to do this differently because of that." So I think that's but your answer was way better than that.
Well, you're totally right. I mean, right. Even for those listening, it's not just us having the conversations. We're learning just as much as the listener is and stuff, but over the course of, for me now, 197 episodes, and for you, however many hundreds it's been and stuff, you can't remember specifically what you learned from episode 43. I don't even know who that was, and stuff. I mean, it all just kind of accumulates and becomes part of who you are. And you try things along the way that, was it a specific podcast? Maybe, but you don't remember where you got the idea. It just kind of changes your mindset over time. And that's the fun of it. That's the cool thing, and then it's cool to hear too, specifically when people reach out about one podcast where it's like, that one made me think differently. That's pretty cool too. But for the most part, it's like you described it, a gradual kind of transition of your way of thinking.
Right. I think that, what you talked about just a minute ago about investing in real estate, I'd like to spend a little bit of time camping out there. And I'm all in on this idea of financially independent, retire early. Yeah. But I don't like the word retire. So I think if we're going to use this, we should say financially independent, repurpose early. Go do something that you would wake up and do for free every day, and see if you can get paid to do that as well. I think that's a great idea. And then use that money to be incredibly generous. I think that's a better deal than just sipping mimosas on the beach or whatever they do,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But you mentioned investing in real estate. How does that work?
Sure.
How did that strategy come to be there for you guys?
No, it's a good question. And actually to the name of the podcast, I've thought for a while, maybe someday I would love to do a real estate podcast as well. And I thought real estate returns would be something I could like co-brand this, tie it in. So anyway,
you
kind of
your
a side
network
thing.
Started.
Yeah. No, I can't specifically pinpoint where the idea came from, but ultimately the action of actually doing it, I'll tell you kind of how it happened. My wife and I have been saving, I'd been saving before we got married, and then we were saving together with the idea of hoping to buy farmland at some point. That's always been a goal or a dream of ours. And I remember in spring of 2020, local corn price was like below $3. And I was like, there is no way by the end of this year, there's not opportunities to purchase land. Like farmers, this is at the end of a 7-year downward stretch of crop prices. I mean, things have got to start to turn. And then the rest of 2020 happened. A bunch of COVID money was shoveled to farmers. And by fall, corn was $8 and land prices were off to the races. And I was like, well, it's not going to happen anytime soon, it seems like. So we started looking at other things to do with that kind of money. And then fall of 2021, we purchased our first long-term rental property, just a local house that we purchased. Actually, we were lucky to start with a individual we knew and trusted who kind of walked us through the process. And like anything, the best way to learn anything is to start. And after we did that first one, we learned so much. We kind of started continuing to do that. We'd buy ones that would need a little bit of cosmetic renovations and things that we could put a little bit of work and a little bit of money into and get a relatively large return on equity and appreciation on the houses and cash flow. And yeah, so I mean, that's kind of where it's gone. We don't have a huge portfolio anymore, or by any means, just a small, few houses and then a vacation rental property. We started trying this last year, but the goal is largely to, we wanted to buy farmland. That hadn't become an opportunity yet. We wanted to get our money investing and working for us and getting us to a point that, that I don't know how to define. I don't plan on retiring either necessarily, at least not anytime soon, but our farm is relatively small. And, I've often thought, there's ways to be able to bring in the next generation. And one of that is maybe to expand the operation. Another way is maybe to make it so that one generation is no longer dependent on the operation for its income. And so if I'm not able to invest and expand this operation, if I can't buy more farmland and we can't be 500, 1,000 cows, maybe I should just be investing in cash flow elsewhere so that if I have a kid that wants to come home and be a part of this operation, that I don't need to be a financial burden to him, and that we're having these discussions of like, well, I can't afford to pay you this, or, we're not big enough for that. So you got to have an off-farm job until I'm ready to retire. And, that I can just, the farm can afford to pay him. And if I get to work on the farm more, great. If I don't have to, because it doesn't need two people, then I'm not tied to it needing the income from it. So kind of a lot of different reasons we came to it ultimately. But yeah, I'd say largely one of those change in mindsets was, I don't have to expand this operation to be able to bring in another farm. I might just have to expand my income so that I maybe am not dependent on the income from the farm necessarily. So
let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Farming Without the Bank. None of you are farming like you did 100 years ago. Why are you financing it like you did 100 years ago? The biggest part of your operation is the money that runs through your hands, and you let someone else control that. The bank gets the final say in what you get money for and when you pay it back. For many, this is a great relationship, until it's not. Farming Without the Bank shows you how you can take back control of your money so that you can make the bank plan B instead of plan A. This is done by you creating your own banking system you own and control. To learn more, tune into the Farming Without the Bank podcast and go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book. Once you've read the book, Mary Jo will meet with you one-on-one and help you determine where and how to get started. She'll most likely also touch base on some estate transition ideas, financing ideas, business growth or startup ideas, and many other things she has experience with from helping thousands of farmers and ranchers like you. So go to farmingwithoutthebank.com to get the book today and subscribe to the Farming Without the Bank podcast. Very cool. Are there any rules of thumb or wrist, as it were, that have helped guide you in your purchasing of properties and some of those things?
Rules of thumb. That's a good question. I really have not put as much mental thought towards the whole real estate conversation as I do ranching, because I don't often talk about it. But, I've read a lot of books, listened to a lot of podcasts, endless hours of audio and different content consumed on this. And that's good. You should learn. And then when you start diving in, digging into the numbers and things like that, that's good. You should do that. But I spent 4 years probably looking at numbers before I finally bought my first property. And the properties that I was looking at when I started looking at them had probably increased in value by nearly $75,000 by the time that I actually purchased one. And so, I guess my one rule of thumb or word of wisdom would be, get information, run your numbers, make sure you're not in a position that you're going to be putting yourself or your family at risk. Don't do that. But once you know worst case scenario, you're going to be fine, even if it doesn't work out quite like you expect. Just do it. Just dive in and get something done. You'll learn way more doing that than you will reading, studying, learning, anything else. And even if the market turns, even if the property doesn't do quite as well as you hope or whatever that is, you're going to learn. You're going to build equity long-term in it anyway. If you don't want to be in it for at least 5 to 10 years, I wouldn't mess with it. It should be a long-term outlook on something like that. But yeah, then there's so much more you can get into real estate. There's tons of different, there's commercial, there's long-term, short-term, medium-term rentals. There's a bunch of different stuff that you can get involved with
Sure.
that. But,
is there a certain percentage of cash you want to be able to plunk down on whatever you're buying, like a percentage of the actual purchase price that you're trying to have in cash before you go out and start looking?
Yeah. I mean, there's a million different perspectives on that and stuff too. There's people out there who'd say you should have as little of your own money in the deal as possible. I would say I'm not that. And I'm not Dave Ramsey either, where I think you should be 100% cash, but I want to have a healthy, strong cash flow position that, there's going to be quite the turn for me to be upside down on something. I'm putting minimum of 25% down is what my bank requires. And I have no problem with that. And then I'm also trying to put a few $1,000s into some upgrading of it so that I have even more equity than 25% down. Or I put 25% down, but I'm hopefully in the 35 to 40% equity position because we built some, forced appreciation into that real estate through some, renovations and stuff like that. That's where I feel the most comfortable. But, I know people who will borrow a lot more and borrow against something somewhere else and, to make things work. And that's fine too. It's all depends on your comfort zone and your risk tolerance and stuff. But that's where I guess I'd rather have a little stronger equity position, a little stronger cash flow position. Your return on your cash may not be quite as high, but I guess I sleep better at night. And that's a literal, I inherited that from my dad, where risk and stress, can affect my daily living. And if it's not, if you're doing things that are affecting your daily living to a point where you're stressed or not sleeping well at night or something, I don't care if I get another 1% on my, my money. It doesn't seem worth it at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I honestly, I want to go this direction if you're comfortable with it. And the reason why is because I think that a lot of ranches that are experiencing returns on their ranching enterprises should be investing that off the ranch, and that's probably the way to grow that enterprise business is not necessarily by being able to pay, $3-4 million for the neighbor's place, but by having a portfolio of real estate or whatever that investment looks like for you in town that, also can sustain you through down markets in your own main ranching enterprise, but also be a retirement portfolio for you in the future. Yeah. And so I think this is a valuable conversation, and I think it's something that we could spend a little bit more time on if you're all right with that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. And it's actually, there's definitely some imposter syndrome here. So I hope I'm not an expert in any of this, and people should take it with a grain of salt and figure out what's best for them. I'm 3 years into this real estate thing, so I'm by no means an expert, but I do agree with you. I had Alan Crockett on not too long ago and asked him kind of that question: with times are good, what should people be investing in? And he talked about outside of off the ranch investments. And I think that's a great point. And not just for necessarily when times are bad, but I don't know, there's places in the country where people face complete destocking on a regular basis. And I've always wondered, like, literally, how do they survive that? Because not only are they're destocking when the value of their livestock is probably the lowest, and then they're having to restock while the value of the purchase of the livestock is the highest. And somehow they have to carry whatever operating expenses and debt they have in the meantime. Like, how do people physically do that? And so, yeah, for a person in that scenario, to me, having some sort of consistent cash flow from off farm would be the difference between, a lot of stress and sleeping soundly. So, yeah.
So there's no need for imposter syndrome here because it's just me and you having this conversation, and I have bought no investment real estate. So
okay, all right, good. In this conversation, then I guess I am.
You're the expert.
The expert. I would not say that, but we'll go with it. Sure.
Okay, so my next question on the real estate front: what's the best investment as far as when you're buying an undervalued property? What are some of the things that you like? Okay, you're going to buy an undervalued cow or undervalued bovine, buy a bull calf, take it home, cut it. He's worth a certain amount more right away.
Great way of looking at this. Yeah.
Right. So in real estate, what's the bull calf, or what are, you buy this house, worst house in the best neighborhood, go inside, the bathroom is a wreck. Do you start there, or what are some of those places you start when you're thinking about, this is what I'm going to do to add value to this property?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And like so many things, there's so many different ways to look at it. And I would say it depends on an individual's skill set and willingness to mess with stuff, because you can go find dumps for like dirt cheap that the right person can go and turn into a dream home and just crush it. I'm not that person. I don't have that skill set. So what I'm looking for is properties that are, first of all, solid, like foundation, solid properties. They're not going to fall apart on me. Like we looked at some properties that look like they could fall apart. And I'm like, I'm not messing with none of that. And that's not me. I'm not confident enough in that. So ideally properties for me are ones that are like way outdated, maybe have a, funny smell to it, old carpet, things that a person can get in myself or with a couple handymen, or like a handyman kind of a guy. Don't need to bring any really experienced pros in and turn around and turn into a nice place. So
pink toilet.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So a lot of the things we put new floors in, paint throughout, and updated a bathroom is like kind of, and updated a kitchen. Those are kind of the things that I'm messing with, because those are things I can do for relatively cheap that make a huge difference. And when you walk into a house that has, it was the weirdest thing. This is another thing you can look for that I guess we did in one property. It was marketed as a 3-bedroom. We walked up the stairs and walked into the bathroom, and there was a tub, no shower, which I've seen in other ones. And I was like, this is interesting. There's no shower. And you walk around into this room behind that, and it's a shag carpet, and there's a shower in a random bedroom. And so we pulled that shower out, pushed the wall back, put it in the bathroom, and turned it into a 4-bedroom instead of a 3-bedroom. And now we had a bathroom with a shower instead of a weird closet shower thing. And so, it's kind of a little things like that. I mean, adding a bedroom, it makes it more rentable and stuff too. So, then there's people like my brother who bought a place that did have a foundation issue, and he went out and researched, got quotes on foundation repair, and negotiated the price down further than what it cost him to do that. And so he was able to make a foundation issue make him money too. So, there's people in their comfort zone. It's all depend, what you want to do. But those are I'd look for more just cosmetic repairs that I can make relatively simply with some sweat equity and, late nights and stuff like that. Yeah.
How important is YouTube University?
Yeah. Very for a lot of that stuff. And honestly, the things that I did though, like I shouldn't even say I did a lot of this. I hired someone to do the flooring and put in the carpet. Nice. I really pretty much have only cleaned and painted, ripped up. I rip up carpet. That I didn't need YouTube for that. Luckily, it just,
I can destroy things.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. And then hire people to do some of those, professionals that can go in and throw in an entire house worth of flooring and carpet in 2 days or whatever. I mean, that would have taken me a month. And so, there is something to be said for time, value of time too. You can do things yourself, but if it takes you a month, you probably would have been better off. I mean, a month's worth of rent could have paid for the job to get done too.
Yep. So when I started the podcast, I went through John Lee Dumas's free podcast course. I recommend it to everybody who reaches out to me and asks, how do I start a podcast? And he, in one of those episodes of that, he talks about the $200,000 mistake that he made in starting his podcast. And what he means by that is I waited an extra month to start my podcast. And now his podcast and the whole empire he built around it was netting him $200,000 a month or grossing $200,000 a month, And so he said that was a $200,000 mistake by waiting a month to start it, know? And so talk about the value of your time, hiring somebody versus doing it yourself. I think that's a huge thing. And in all areas of ranching, I think we should really push the pencil on a lot of those things that we find ourselves doing, the working in the business things that we find ourselves doing that you probably could hire somebody else to do. And then your time is more valuable, more profitably spent doing other things. So I think that's a huge thing to think about for sure.
You're definitely right. It's easy, maybe just ranching where you can't, I don't know. It's easier to define the value of a time if you end up delaying the renting of something a month and then you lose 1 month's rent. That's easier to define. It's maybe hard to define that in ranching, but it's maybe not even. It's like the opportunity cost of what you could have done elsewhere. A little. It's harder to define, but probably just as, if not more valuable. In ranching.
Yeah. What have been some of the important relationships that you've needed to maintain and that as far as being successful in this real estate investing sphere?
Yeah. So in the long-term rentals, I would say in both scenarios, we have a vacation rental property and long-term rental properties, multiple of those. Both of the key first people we had to find was a good realtor. In both scenarios, that was incredibly valuable. The realtor we found for the long-term rentals happened to own 30 rentals himself. And so he knows the model. We walk properties where he's like, no, this isn't going to be a good one for you. You shouldn't mess with this. And this one, let's do it on this one. Let's make this one happen. And then he can connect me with flooring guys and handymen and different, people beyond that. So that's your first point of contact. But, and I should say too, a banker, if you don't already have one. Probably most people in ag and ranching and farming have access to a good banker, but that's going to be important. With the vacation rental property, same thing. The realtor happened to be a vacation rental property manager, which was intentional on our part. I wanted somebody who, when they walk in a property, would say, and same thing, we walk through properties. She's like, no, that's not, this one isn't going to rent well. This one's in the wrong county. You do not want to mess with this county. Their rules and regulations are horrible. And this one is, much better. And, they know what they're dealing with and what they're doing and stuff. And, especially when you're starting out, or if you're in a community or a neighborhood that you're not familiar with, because I'd listened to enough podcasts and stuff that I thought I could understand the vacation rental deal and stuff. But when the first property we sent him, he said, you don't want one in that county. Their regulations, everything has to be disability handicap accessible. And I was like, that would have been horrible if we bought a property and then found out we have to put in a lift and widen all the doors and put in a new tub. And, that would have been a very, very expensive mistake. So having people who are experts when you don't really know the things you don't even know that you don't know, it's important.
Yeah. No, I had a realtor one time save my bacon. She wasn't even my realtor. She was a member of the church I was a pastor at, but she called me up on the day of our closing on this lot that we were going to buy and put a house on it. And she said, you really need to do some more research because I don't think this is going to go well if you actually buy that lot because of the covenants in that area. First of all, they're not going to, according to the covenants, shouldn't let you move that house in there. Secondly, you're going to have to build an attached 2-car garage sided to match, which, probably back then was a $30,000 or $40,000 extra expense. Yeah. And God was looking out for us because as tight as our next 5 years in that house ended up being, it would have been even tighter if we had to spend another $40,000 building a attached 2-car garage. So just I'm echoing your find a good realtor. And so subsequently she ended up selling that house for us. When we sold the house that we ended up moving into a different lot, she was the one we went to sell it. And that was a very good experience as well. So, echoing that for sure. Good realtors are important. What are any other important relationships that jump to the front of your mind?
Well, all of the other important relationships, I would say they've connected me with. So that was a good starting point. But yes, a good handyman, good, the vacation property thing, you need a good cleaner, good property cleaner, good handyman, good, what other kind of things have we used? I mean, just inspectors, things like that, people that are going to be able to look through the property and tell you, really know and find what's wrong with it before you buy and stuff like that. I've heard of some crazy mistakes made where they buy something without an inspection and find out that the plumbing is completely disconnected from the city sewer or something, and they're going to have to put in, install that for $20,000 a repair or something, like that could have been found out with a scope on the sewer system and stuff like that. So
the second house we bought, this guy, older guy, widower, moving out of his house, moving into a assisted living facility.
Yeah.
And we bought this house and probably moved into it with 2 kids. Probably a couple months after we bought it, we're starting to have the sewer backing up into the basement all the time. If you wash a load of laundry, it's going to back up into the basement shower. And so I call the guy with the drain snake to come and run his camera down the drain. And he's like, yeah, we used to come here and snake this drain in the spring and the fall every year. I'm like, oh, well, that would have been great to know before we bought the property, but it didn't come up on the inspection. And so, for sure, I can tell you.
Yeah.
So since that time, my thought on inspectors has been that I want to hire the inspector that's going to try and talk me out of buying this place. If you're buying a place that's older, for sure, So what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it's funny, on our vacation rental property that we bought, the realtor we worked with, he has an inspector that he always works with, and he literally warned us. He said, I will warn you, you will get a 75-page document from this inspector, and he has broken many deals essentially, and a lot of realtors in this neighborhood hate him because they've got a property sold and he comes in and he talks them out of it and stuff. And so our realtor forewarned us that was this kind of a guy, and it actually came back pretty good report. And he's like, I'm honestly surprised, this must be a good one, because he didn't come up with a ton. So I agree with you. I think that's important. Far better to make a $300 investment into an inspector and save on a many thousands of dollar mistake. The people who think they can just walk a property and they know everything about it, I am not that guy. So there are people out there who can do that probably, but that is not me. So at least not yet. I will always lean on the wisdom of those with more experience.
What are the differences, advantage, disadvantages between long-term and vacation rentals?
Long-term rentals, for the most part, if you can get a good tenant in, are fairly headache-free, fairly problem-free. Now, I should say it also depends on what level of management you want to hire. With our vacation property manager, we hire a professional manager who happened to be that realtor. And so that has been very headache-free for us, because he's doing all of the headaches, but he's taking a larger cut out of the income. Our long-term rentals we manage ourselves, but they're relatively low hassle, low headaches for the most part and stuff too. So that, the amount of management that you're going to deal with is going to be different. One thing that I've kind of I've heard in podcasts that have kind of made us lean towards trying that vacation rental property thing is that the quality of property you can buy with vacation rental income versus long-term income, it's a very big different thing. All of our long-term rentals are 100-year-old houses. That's the kind of what we consider maybe starter homes for a lot of people. You can't buy a nice new or even close to new high quality property in a nice neighborhood and try and rent it out on a long-term rental by the month to, on an annual lease and expect it to pay the mortgage on that. That just will not work. But in some of the right properties in the right locations with a vacation property, you maybe can. And so that was one thing that intrigued us about that, is that it's something that hopefully we can upgrade the quality of properties that we're buying a little bit. Because when we started, the ones we were getting were nothing special, and they really still aren't. But that's honestly one of the things I love about the long-term rentals, though, too, is so much stuff in agriculture is so expensive. I mean, in my area, to go out and buy a 40-acre farm that is a very small farm is going to cost me $500,000. I can buy 3 long-term rental properties for that, or I can buy one at a time as I'm comfortable, build up a little savings, buy one. Do the same thing with another. There's a lot of people I know who went into the confinement hog barn operation, where they get a contract barn built. To build one of those now, I think, is around $1 million. the amount of capital you have to bite off the smallest scale you can really do in agriculture, one 2,400 head unit, finisher barn, or one 40-acre farm, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, where these long-term rentals you can buy pretty inexpensively, which is a great way to get started, and which is partly why we got started that way. Now, the vacation rental property was significantly more expensive, but we had some other properties working for us and helping us. Just like with anything, you kind of get some momentum going, you can bite off bigger things. But now that we've gone up the price point a little bit, we're getting a little higher quality property, hopefully a little less headaches, and in a little nicer neighborhood. And one of the biggest advantages I'm excited about, we haven't really been able to yet, is the personal use aspect of it too. We're hoping that we can enjoy it as well in our family. I mean, we talk about lifestyle, and that's part of our lifestyle goals, is to be able to get away a little more as a family. Right now, we spend a lot of time when your workplace is also your place of your home, your living space and stuff. It can be really valuable to get away. So we hope this can be a piece of that, lifestyle improvement for us.
So have those purchases, the vacation rental purchases, have they been kind of in destinations like a lake or something where you'd want to go?
Yeah. We only have one. We just started that this past year, and that's 3 hours away at a lake. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're excited to hopefully get up there in the next few weeks, even now as we wrap up the busy fall and stuff. So yeah.
Sure. Are the advantages low startup costs, or lower startup costs on the long-term rentals, but higher cash flow and returns on the short-term or on the vacation rentals? What? Yeah.
I would say the returns, like the return on your investment, may be about the same, but the vacation rentals allow us to buy a higher quality property.
Right.
Which, and there's a podcaster, author I really like, Chad Carson, who wrote a book, Small and Mighty Real Estate Investors, and his kind of philosophy and mindset is, I'm looking for the book over here. I think I've got it somewhere, but his kind of philosophy and mindset is to, whatever number you need to live the way you want to live, essentially try and reach that with as few properties as possible, because less properties is less headaches. And so, if we can, someday trade, instead of having, you might be able to generate the same amount of net revenue with 5 vacation properties as you would with 20 long-term rentals. And the values may be about the same. The returns may be about the same, but there's going to be a lot less headache managing 5 properties versus 20 potentially, or something. Mm-hmm. So, his kind of having a small portfolio is better. And so that kind of allows us to buy higher quality properties that will hopefully be less headaches over the long term. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'd still say my long-term goal is to maybe, I don't know what will happen. We've talked about, at some point we could 1031 a lot of these into farmland or, ranch land at some point too, so that we haven't ruled that out as, part of our future. It just hasn't been an option for us yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's going to be your next purchase? If you had to say right now, are you leaning more towards long-term, more towards another vacation rental?
Oh man, good question. Well, I might be out your direction. I've been looking at the Black Hills, South Dakota region as a place that I would really love to have a place someday. So been looking at the vacation rental market out there, trying to, again, like I talk about it, you got to have the right person that'll help. And I haven't taken the step to reach out to someone out there and really learn the market yet. So it's kind of just been window shopping via Zillow and different things like that. I got a name for you. Yeah, well, perfect. It sounds like you do, actually. Yeah, that'd be great. But I don't think it'll be too many more long-term rentals. Honestly, like I would say my goal would be, I love farming and ranching. I'd like to buy land. Okay. That would be my dream. But I don't know if that opportunity will present itself in the near future. And if it doesn't, then we'll just keep right on the real estate train, I guess, until that farmland opportunity does come. So,
is there an exit strategy on the real estate investment? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I'd say that's also part of why we wanted to maintain a decent equity position and stuff. So that's kind of our savings account for if the right farmland opportunity comes up, and 1031 exchange those into something else. That would, I'd say, unless that happens, I don't foresee exiting it. The cash flow is good and very acceptable, and it's been an awesome side thing to complement our, all of the different things we got going on, that it's a good way to reach that. What do you call it? Financial independent repurpose early. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. That's been a big part of that plan. So I don't foresee getting rid of that unless it's for something different.
Do you have any major lessons learned, things that you would say if you're getting started out, don't make this mistake?
Vet tenants well. We've had 4 tenants total across our properties over the last 3 years, and 3 of them have been amazing. We'll just leave it at that. Vet tenants well. That'll save you a lot of headache down the road.
Background check, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it can be background background check, references, different things like that. And honestly, in the scenario we had where it hadn't worked out so well, I'm not honestly sure what I would have done differently. But I sometimes, I guess, things just happen, I guess. But I'm not. Man, that's a good question. Not entirely. There haven't been a ton of huge mistakes. I think the biggest mistake I made was waiting 4 years to buy the first property. We looked at a property, I should say 2.5 years earlier, that I wish so badly we had bought it. Probably went up over $100,000 by the time we finally first bought our first property. And I just, yeah. So waiting, they say, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. And I'm not trying to push everyone that way, because who knows, we may be at a high of a market here. I don't really know. I'm not some forecaster, but if I plan to hold it in the long term, I guess I know 20 years down the road, whether I bought it now or 3 years from now or 3 years ago, I'll be glad I bought it either way. So
very cool. So some of your favorite resources, what would be on that list? I mean, you mentioned Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor by Chad Carson. Podcast.
He has the Real Estate Investing podcast is his podcast.
Okay.
And then the Rental Income podcast. Those two I really enjoy because there's a ton of real estate podcasts out there that spend so much time talking to the people who have thousands of doors, tons of massive, portfolios full of stuff. And I would say both of those people are at the very real world level. Both of them just talk to people about reaching what it takes to get to whatever your financial independence number is, whatever it is, that's 50,000, 100,000, something like that. You don't have to be this massive multimillionaire, just reach whatever goal yours is. I like them. They're at the real level. They're not so far out in outer space that it seems unreachable. And then if people want to go the short-term route, there's the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast and the Short-Term Show, which I've really enjoyed as well for kind of similar reasons. And then there's a million books that I could recommend as well, but we'll leave it at that. A lot of those same podcast hosts are also authors, so you can find the same books by the same people. So
very good.
Or similar books by the same people.
We'll have links to as much of that as we can in the show notes page for today. And of course, your great podcast, the Ranching Returns podcast. So anything else that you want to say before we let you go?
No, I don't think so. I really appreciate you letting me come back on and talk about that. I didn't expect it to take the turn that it did, but hopefully it provides some value to some people. And yeah, if they're interested in tuning into the Ranching Returns podcast, it still feels weird rolling off the tongues that way and stuff. But yeah, that'd be great. I sure appreciate it, Clay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, they definitely should tune in and listen. And I didn't expect it to take this direction either, but I was like, that's a great little thread to pull on, and it ended up working out. So I appreciate you being willing to roll with my ADD a little bit.
No, absolutely. Happy to do it.
All right. Thanks, Jared. Thanks for your time today.
You bet. Yeah.
Very good stuff there with Jared. Really appreciate just kind of the lessons he's learned and some of the difference it's been making in his family and their ability to enjoy a better quality of life, and even just some of the ancillary benefits that strategy has brought into their life. Very, very much appreciate that. Looking forward to next week on the Working Cows podcast, episode 400, with a special repeat guest, and we'll just keep you on the hook for who that might be. Maybe you can take a stab at guessing who you think it is in the comments wherever you see this on social media, or Spotify now allows you to comment on podcasts. If you want to take a guess there, be my guest. But also maybe some changes a little bit in the sound of the Working Cows podcast. And so keep an ear open for that if you're interested. Been doing this for just over 7 years now and thought maybe it's time to educate myself a little bit more and brush up and maybe tighten some things up around here on the Working Cows podcast. So pay attention and see if you notice a difference next week. We'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.